G'day, g'day, g'day. It's Mathematical KM, Keith Molumby, coming to you with round 8 of the Tuggeranong Chess Club Champs. And fighting a little bit uphill in this one. I do have the white pieces, but 1450 elo to my opponent 1640. And wheeling out the water horse again today. A little bit of a unique sort of game. It's something I've not encountered yet, playing the water horse. And if I was to title this video, it'll be a little bit, the gun's not jammed, pull the trigger. A couple of times we're a little bit hesitant, and he who hesitates is lost. So, let's go. Okay, oh, hang on. That's a bit of a mirror image. And mirror image. And mirror image. So is this Hippo versus Hippo? You cannot actually have two water horses, because think about the double fianchettos. It's all going to be a bit crazy. So continuing with normal Hippo moves, but if my opponent's not going for any room, not taking the space, should I be taking the space? I might be sending this game off to Solomon for a bit of advice on how he would approach. How many moves are we in now? 4 moves in, and it's a little bit of a what's going on here. So anyway, I threw a knight there, protected by the queen, and it will allow me to fianchetto my kingside bishop, is the thinking. Controlling his knight first, and it's a pawn move we would normally make anyway. He's developed a knight over there. It's another pawn move we would tend to make. And that knight, that's where it normally goes. He's developed his queen. I developed it with a bit of space, and it's like one of the pawn pushes we would normally make, and in the future we might be looking at g5 to kick that knight around. He's castled queenside, fianchettoed the bishop. We're on 0v0 for the game at the moment, and that's probably fair enough with both sides playing the hippopotamus, sort of. I've got nearly the typical hippo, one out of place knight, and my opponent most of the hippo pawn structure and one bishop sort of not fianchettoed but developed in the middle. So it's kind of interesting. And a little minor lesson for the next time. Right here, right now, for my next move, the computer would like me to develop my queen, which will allow my king to zip in either direction when required. So no idea where my king's going to be, and we know where the black king is. So queen to e2 would have been the go, but okay, we'll continue. They say pawn moves cause weaknesses, so both rooks over where I've advanced my pawns the most. Queen e2 again. Computer would have liked me to develop. Now I've come in thinking about that's the side of the board where his king is. Let's get some pieces headed over there. Now, knight takes, his knight taking my knight would have been best for him. I would have taken back with my bishop and not ruined my pawn structure. But interestingly enough now, we know where his king is. His rooks are as far away as they can get. And defenders of the king, they really should be exchanged. So this is the first pull the trigger. Should have, would have, could have taken his knight with my knight, and then had, if he'd taken back with the queen, well, eventually dangerous, because I've got, it doesn't quite go off its tracks like that, but I've got a bishop lined up on that diagonal. So if I took his knight here and he took back with the queen, who knows eventually. And also it's one less defender around where his king is. So that's lesson learnt for next time. Pull that trigger. When it's a fair trade, my king can go left or right or stay in the middle. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, didn't. So, yep, there's a mistake. And we've gone from plus 0.6 down to -1 with that move. Great move for him to get rid of my knight there. I take back. He's trying to push through over there on the H file, H side of things. And I'm thinking at this point, if I can get a semi-open file aimed at his king, that's not the worst thing in the world. Apparently G5 hassling that knight, and also stopping black from getting a semi-open file at any point coming through to me would have been better. So, but anyway, he takes with the bishop. We're still down on that -1, which is when we didn't pull the trigger that little bit earlier. I was thinking, let's ask that bishop to move away. It can't take the B pawn. It's really got to back up where it came from. Now, I was thinking about getting that knight to here, and amongst other things, my queen is now protecting my otherwise unprotected D pawn. So it was sort of half of a plan. And initially as well, putting the knight here protects the bishop, which is otherwise would have been hanging with the queen attacking it. He puts into play his scheme that's been over there for a while. H takes G, H takes G, rook takes rook, bishop takes rook, and now he wins a pawn, which is not good. So seeing that through, and a little bit earlier, stopping that from even being a thing with pushing the pawn forward. I think I talked about this in last week's game when I won, of getting rid of my opponent's ideas and then trying to do my ideas, and I just sort of ignored that one. To my own detriment, he's ended up playing it. He's got the semi-open file, won a pawn as well. All well and good. Now let's get that bishop out of the way. He's rerouting his knight. Line up a rook on the king. Like knight e5 early. The computer wanted the knight attacking the queen earlier, but he's brought a rook lining up on that D pawn. If he took it with his queen, there'd then be a queen trade and he'd win another pawn at the moment. But this attacks his queen and gives me a second guardian of the D pawn. If he took the D pawn at this point in time, I'd take his queen with my knight. So that's not so bad. He's moved his queen away. You may have noticed this pawn would have been hanging. If he'd moved his queen and giving your opponent a chance to go wrong, if he'd put his queen here, not only would that have been winning a pawn, it would have been a fork on a rook and a queen. So back it goes. And now we've got a battery aimed at c7. So, and currently that's checkmate. So giving him a chance to lose the game, that's probably not going to happen here. So let's see. Nice, the best move. Bishop to protect that pawn. Let's attack that bishop. He's moved his king. And it's a mistake. And again, pull that trigger. The half a plan that I'd been thinking of, if I didn't get the checkmate on c7, I was looking to get myself a pawn fork. I think you can see it if you're looking at the game with me now. White to move. And again, pull the trigger. You can't, and I'm learning this, you can't get everything utterly and totally perfect before you pull the trigger. Sometimes if it's there, but it may loosen your king up a little bit, some activity might be gained by your opponent. Still, pull the trigger. There is a clear and definite... What's he going to do? If he takes with the bishop and I take back, he might be able to win another pawn or not. Queen's protecting it. I was just a little bit worried, a little bit overly cautious right here. And woulda, coulda, shoulda played e5. Take that pawn fork right now. Let's take a quick little look at what the computer says. e5, bishop takes h1. He gets the rook in the corner, threatening the queen. He takes that. I take that. I get the check that was originally planned. It's no longer checkmate. King a8 is forced. Get a pawn. Queen trade. This was all fairly forcing moves. And when the dust settles, 4 pawns versus 5 pawns with a bishop each. A lot of his pawns are on dark squares. Interesting how that would have gone down. However, that's not what we're here to so much see. Let's take a look at instead what did happen. But that looked pretty sharp with if we'd gone down that path. And that was with playing e5, which kept it at nearly a draw, minus 0.2, which very much was what came out of the end of that. Knight takes, and again, pull the other trigger. It's a real option. I had a lot of thinking about it here. If I was to take the bishop with the knight, I will then get, number one, he's going to take the knight because the doesn't want to lose his queen. And then we're into playing with checks and all those fun and games. And very much it's white with the attack and carrying through the attack. It might peter out, it might end up being nearly drawish, but it'd be interesting to follow this one all the way down. But it's definitely the way to go. And once more, I don't normally go down these side alleys, but it's just the theme of today's video is pull that trigger, carry out the attack, be the one in that little bit of control if it's there to be had. Let's get rid of the coulda, woulda, shoulda stuff. And again, we'll go back to being a little bit too cautious and how it's ended up biting me in the behind. So let's go. That's connected, played to give a little bit more protection to the D pawn, connected the light squared bishop to the rook on C, rook on C1. It was a mistake. It's jumped down to minus 2.5. Should have pulled the trigger, either the pawn fork or knight coming in, threatening the queen and getting my battery in. Shoulda, woulda, coulda pulled the trigger, didn't. Okay? Too passive a defensive move there. So, let's see how I got punished for making it. Right, pawn fork? I don't think so, says Blake. Right here, right now, it's not quite as good, but it's still good, is knight takes d6. Pull that trigger. Set up the battery. The bishop's the defender, stopping it from happening. If I don't go for the queen trade, there's every chance of getting a good chance of getting a perpetual happening in there. It woulda, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Pull the trigger. Knight takes bishop. Pawn takes back. Queen up, check. Go from there. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. And this is where I made a bit of a tactical blind spot error. A little bit overly focused on getting the pawn fork at this point without really thinking about the forking pawn being pinned and not being able to carry out the fork. It's probably the dodgiest, worst part of the game. I can forgive myself for not pulling the trigger. That's a lesson learned. When I've got something like that and it's not quite perfect, I'm still going to pull that trigger and get that attack going. But let's get that pawn out of the way so that I can do my pawn fork, and you can look at the eval. Yeah, no, bit of a mistake. Oh look, pawn fork. Oh no, pawn can't actually carry the pawn fork out because of where the king is. Very discombobulated, done it to my own pieces. We're in trouble now. Bishop takes bishop. Discombobulating me as well. Probably should have and it's still saying right here, knight takes d6. Should have still taken that. The original plan with the battery coming in with the checks. Now I can't, without a bit of mucking around, that battery's gone. Knight takes bishop, can't, it's no longer there, can't do it. Because the queen can't take c7 anymore. Nice move. Let's get the battery back. It's all gone a little bit. Queen takes b2. I mean, what should I take the bishop with? It sounds like the queen, which would protect the pawn. I take it with the knight. The knight was the only guard of the pawn. He gets the pawn. It's all good. And I knew it had been slipping. So I hadn't pulled the trigger when I needed to. And it was almost a courtesy to my opponent to let the final... I let him get the fork of the queen and the king, and could have shaken his hands just even a little earlier, but let it get this far and said well done to my opponent. So there's no guarantee that if I'd pulled the trigger either on the pawn fork when it was initially there and would have worked, and I had two chances for knight takes d6 and queen takes c7 check. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, didn't. But so the lessons learned from today's water horse game are very much if the attack isn't necessarily perfect, but it's going to work to an extent and you might get some sort of an edge out of it, pull the trigger. So there's that. And there's also maybe taking a look at if your opponent is copying the water horse itself at the start, should I be taking some of that space with a variant on the and not having everything in the third rank? Should I take some more space in the middle? Just, making sure that I get my two fianchettoed bishops. But they're the things to think about. So today's was definitely a learning game. A couple of lessons learnt. And giving up 200 points of elo. It was probably one I was meant to lose, but I'll tell you what. Came out of the opening, organised an attack, just didn't pull the trigger. If I'd pulled the trigger, who knows? Well, that's it from the Mathematical KM. See you next time.